Imagine opening your mailbox, checking your bank account, and discovering that for years you may have been making one of the most expensive retirement decisions of your life without even realizing it. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you broke a rule, but because one little known Social Security restriction has quietly influenced when millions of Americans retire, when they claim benefits, and how much money they ultimately receive. Now, for the first time in decades, Congress is considering a proposal that could completely erase that restriction. If this proposal becomes law, some Americans could keep thousands of dollars that would otherwise be withheld from their Social Security checks. Others may suddenly have far more flexibility about when they retire. And for many people approaching retirement, it could completely change the strategy they've been planning for years. But before you celebrate, there is something extremely important you need to understand. This proposal sounds simple on the surface, but hidden underneath are rules, trade-offs, and financial consequences that could affect your retirement income for the rest of your life. Some people could benefit tremendously. Others could accidentally make decisions that cost them tens of thousands of dollars over time. That's why today we're breaking down exactly what this proposed law does, why lawmakers want it, who stands to benefit the most, and what every current and future Social Security recipient needs to know before making any decisions. If you care about protecting your retirement income, make sure you're subscribed and stay with me until the end. Because one of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding this proposal could lead retirees into making a permanent mistake that cannot be undone later. Right now in Congress, lawmakers are debating a proposal called the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026. The name sounds straightforward, but the impact could be enormous. The proposal was introduced by Representative Greg Murphy and Senator Rick Scott. Their goal is simple. They want to eliminate the Social Security earnings test entirely. Not reduce it, not modify it, not raise the threshold, eliminate it completely. Now, if you've never heard of the earnings test before, you're not alone. In fact, it may be one of the most misunderstood rules in the entire Social Security system. Many Americans don't discover it until after they begin collecting benefits and continue working. That's often when they receive an unpleasant surprise. They expected to collect their full Social Security benefit, only to learn that some or even most of their payments would be withheld because their earnings exceeded a certain limit. For years, this rule has created confusion, frustration, and anxiety among workers approaching retirement. Some people delay retirement because of it. Some delay claiming benefits because of it. Others claim too early or too late because they misunderstand how it works. And according to many retirement experts, the confusion itself may be costing Americans billions of dollars in poor retirement decisions. To understand why lawmakers are targeting this rule, we need to travel back nearly a century. Social Security was created in 1935 during the Great Depression. America was facing one of the worst economic crises in its history. Millions of people were unemployed. Older Americans often had no reliable source of income. Social Security was designed as a safety net, providing retirement income for people who were no longer participating in the workforce. At the time, lawmakers believed retirement and employment should remain largely separate. If someone was still working and earning a substantial income, the government felt that person should not simultaneously collect full retirement benefits. As a result, the earnings test became part of the original Social Security framework. For decades, the philosophy remained largely unchanged. Social Security was viewed primarily as a retirement program rather than an income supplement for active workers. But as the economy evolved, Americans began working longer. Life expectancy increased. Healthcare improved. Many older workers remained healthy and productive well beyond traditional retirement age. Eventually, lawmakers began recognizing that the earnings test was discouraging people from remaining in the workforce. By the late 1990s, critics argued that the rule was outdated and no longer reflected modern retirement realities. People wanted flexibility. Some wanted to work part-time. Others wanted to gradually transition into retirement instead of stopping work completely. Then came a major change. In the year 2000, Congress eliminated the earnings test for individuals who had reached full retirement age. That decision remains in effect today. Once you reach your full retirement age, you can earn as much money as you want without having a single dollar withheld from your Social Security benefits. But here's the catch. If you claim benefits before reaching full retirement age, the earnings test still applies. And that's exactly what the new proposal seeks to eliminate. Under current 2026 rules, if you're below full retirement age for the entire year, you can earn up to $24,480. Once your earnings exceed that amount, Social Security begins withholding benefits. Specifically, for every $2 you earn above the limit, $1 of your Social Security benefits is withheld. At first glance, that may not sound too severe, but when you look at real numbers, the impact can be startling. Imagine you're 63 years old. You've started collecting Social Security benefits. Your monthly benefit is $2,000, which means you're scheduled to receive $24,000 during the year. At the same time, you're still employed and earning $70,000 annually. Under current rules, your earnings exceed the limit by $45,520. Because Social Security withholds $1 for every $2 earned above the threshold, approximately $22,760 of your benefits would be withheld. Think about that for a moment. You expected $24,000 in Social Security benefits. Instead, almost the entire amount disappears. In practice, Social Security often accomplishes this by withholding monthly checks altogether until the required withholding amount has been reached. Many retirees suddenly find themselves wondering why their benefits stopped arriving, only to discover that the earnings test is responsible. Now imagine that same scenario under the proposed law. The earnings test no longer exists. You're still 63 years old. You're still earning $70,000 from work. You're still receiving $2,000 per month in Social Security benefits. But now, instead of losing nearly $23,000 to benefit withholding, you keep every dollar. That's why supporters of the proposal argue that this change would restore freedom and flexibility to older workers. They believe Americans should not be punished simply because they choose to remain productive after claiming benefits. However, before anyone assumes this is an automatic win, there's an important detail that rarely makes the headlines. Many people believe withheld benefits are permanently lost forever. That isn't entirely true. When someone reaches full retirement age, Social Security performs a recalculation. The months during which benefits were withheld because of the earnings test are taken into account. As a result, future monthly benefits may increase to compensate for those previously withheld payments. In other words, the earnings test functions more like a deferral mechanism than a permanent penalty. But here's where reality becomes complicated. Most people don't understand that process. What they see is money disappearing today. They see checks being withheld, they see reduced cash flow, and understandably, many react emotionally. Some quit working earlier than they planned, others delay claiming benefits unnecessarily. Some avoid opportunities that could improve their financial situation because they're afraid of triggering benefit reductions. The result is widespread confusion, and confusion in retirement planning can become extremely expensive. Supporters of the proposed legislation argue that eliminating the earnings test would remove one of the most confusing elements of the Social Security system. They believe workers should be allowed to decide when to claim benefits without worrying about complicated withholding calculations. Yet, not everyone agrees. Critics argue that the earnings test still serves an important purpose. They point out that Social Security was originally designed as retirement income, not supplemental income for people still earning substantial wages. From their perspective, removing the earnings test could encourage people to claim benefits too early, creating long-term financial consequences that many may not fully understand when making the decision. And that concern isn't hypothetical. One of the biggest risks associated with this proposal has nothing to do with benefit withholding. It has everything to do with human behavior. If the earnings test disappears, millions of Americans may suddenly feel encouraged to claim benefits at age 62 simply because there is no longer a penalty for working. But claiming early carries a separate consequence that remains unchanged. That permanent reduction can follow retirees for the rest of their lives. And that's where this discussion becomes much more important than a simple policy debate. Because while the proposed law could increase short-term flexibility and cash flow, It could also lead some retirees toward decisions that permanently reduce their monthly benefits for decades to come. Now, let's talk about the question that really matters. What does all of this mean for you personally? Because whenever a major Social Security proposal appears in Congress, the headlines tend to focus on politics. But retirement planning is not about politics. It's about your money, your future, and the decisions that could affect your income for the rest of your life. If the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026 eventually becomes law, the most immediate change would be simple. Workers under full retirement age would no longer face the Social Security earnings test. That means a 62-year-old collecting benefits while working could earn $50,000, $70,000, $100,000, or even more without seeing Social Security withhold a single dollar because of earnings. For many Americans, that sounds like a dream scenario. More flexibility, more income, more freedom. But this is exactly where people need to slow down and think carefully. Whenever a new opportunity appears, there is always the temptation to focus on the immediate benefit while ignoring the long-term consequences. Retirement planning is filled with examples of people making decisions that felt great today but turned out to be costly years later. Social Security is no exception. Imagine a worker named Robert. He's 62 years old and earns $85,000 per year. Under current rules, claiming Social Security while continuing to work creates complications because the earnings test may withhold a substantial portion of his benefits. Under the proposed law, those restrictions disappear. Robert may look at the situation and think, "Why wait? I'll claim my benefits immediately and collect everything." At first glance, that seems logical. More money arriving each month sounds like a win. But here's the part many people overlook. The earnings test and the early filing reduction are completely different rules. Eliminating one does not eliminate the other. If Robert claims Social Security at age 62, his monthly benefit remains permanently reduced compared to what he would receive by waiting until full retirement age or age 70. That reduction stays with him for life. It doesn't disappear later. It doesn't adjust upwards simply because Congress changed the earnings test. And this distinction may become one of the most important retirement planning conversations of the next several years. Many financial professionals worry that if the earnings test disappears, some workers may rush to claim benefits without fully understanding the permanent reduction attached to early filing. They may focus on collecting checks today while overlooking how much larger those checks could have become by waiting. Consider a simplified example. Suppose someone qualifies for a benefit of $2,000 per month at full retirement age. If they claim early at age 62, that benefit may drop significantly. Instead of receiving the full amount, they might receive only around $1,500 per month. That difference may not seem overwhelming at first, but over the course of a long retirement, those smaller monthly payments can add up to tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now take the comparison even further. If that same individual waits until age 70, delayed retirement credits could substantially increase the monthly benefit. Depending on the situation, the difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 could exceed 70%. Think about that. Two people with similar work histories could end up receiving dramatically different monthly benefits simply because they chose different claiming ages. That's why the smartest retirement strategy has never been about chasing the earliest possible check. It's about understanding the trade-offs and making decisions based on your specific circumstances. Some people absolutely should claim early. Others should wait. The correct answer depends on health, life expectancy, financial resources, employment plans, family circumstances, tax considerations, and personal goals. There is no universal solution, and that's exactly why proposals like this generate so much debate. Supporters argue that Americans deserve freedom. They believe workers should be able to collect benefits they've earned without being penalized for continuing to contribute to the economy. They point out that millions of Americans are working longer than previous generations. Rising living costs, longer lifespans, and changing retirement expectations have transformed the workforce. Many people don't want to stop working completely at 62, 65, or even 67. Instead, they prefer flexibility. Some want to transition into retirement gradually. Others enjoy their careers. Some simply need additional income to maintain their lifestyle. For these workers, eliminating the earnings test could remove a significant obstacle. Critics, however, see another side of the story. They worry about the financial health of Social Security itself. As most Americans know, Social Security already faces long-term funding challenges. Reports from trustees continue to warn about future financial pressures on the system. While eliminating the earnings test may not create a massive immediate crisis, opponents argue that accelerating benefit payments could increase strain on the program over time. They also argue that removing the earnings test could unintentionally encourage early claiming. If millions of workers decide to collect benefits earlier than they otherwise would have, total benefit payouts could rise sooner than expected. That's one reason previous versions of similar legislation struggled to advance through Congress. In fact, this is not the first time lawmakers have proposed eliminating the earnings test. Similar efforts have appeared before. Some generated attention, some attracted support, but ultimately they failed to become law. What makes this version different is the environment in which it's being introduced. America's workforce is changing. Retirement itself is changing. Many people are living longer, staying healthier, and remaining employed well beyond traditional retirement ages. The idea that someone should stop working simply because they begin collecting Social Security feels increasingly outdated to many voters. As a result, interest in this proposal is growing. Still, it is crucial to remember one thing. At the moment, this remains a proposal. It has not become law. Nothing has changed yet. The earnings test remains fully in effect under current rules. Anyone making retirement decisions today must continue following the existing regulations until Congress officially passes legislation and it is signed into law. That means retirees and near retirees should be careful about acting on assumptions or headlines. Too often, people hear about proposed changes and mistakenly believe they are already in place. Financial decisions based on rumors can become costly mistakes. The best approach is to stay informed, monitor developments, and understand how potential changes might affect your situation if they eventually become reality. Another factor that deserves attention is taxation. Even if the earnings test disappears, taxes do not. This is another area where confusion frequently creates problems. Many people assume that if Social Security withholding disappears, every dollar of their benefit becomes extra spending money. In reality, federal income taxes may still apply depending on total income levels. Someone earning substantial wages while collecting Social Security may find that a significant portion of their benefits becomes taxable. The details depend on individual circumstances, filing status, and income sources. But the larger point remains the same. Eliminating the earnings test does not eliminate taxes. That's why retirement planning should never focus on a single rule in isolation. Every decision interacts with other parts of your financial picture. Claiming age affects benefits. Benefits affect taxation. Employment affects income. Income affects tax brackets. Tax brackets affect overall retirement cash flow. Everything is connected. And that brings us to perhaps the most valuable lesson in this entire discussion. The biggest retirement mistakes usually don't happen because people lack intelligence. They happen because retirement rules are incredibly complicated. Social Security alone contains thousands of pages of regulations, exceptions, formulas, and provisions. Most people simply don't have the time or resources to study every detail. As a result, many retirees make decisions based on assumptions. They hear a friend say something, they read a headline, they watch a short news segment, and before long they're making permanent financial decisions based on incomplete information. That's why understanding the difference between flexibility and strategy is so important. The proposed elimination of the earnings test would create more flexibility, but flexibility alone does not automatically create the best outcome. The best outcome comes from combining flexibility with knowledge. It comes from understanding your options. It comes from running the numbers. It comes from evaluating short-term benefits alongside long-term consequences. And it comes from recognizing that what works perfectly for one retiree may be completely wrong for another. As Congress continues debating the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026, millions of Americans will be watching closely. If the proposal advances, it could become one of the most significant Social Security changes in years. It could reshape retirement planning strategies, It could alter claiming decisions, and it could provide new opportunities for workers who want to continue earning income while collecting benefits. But regardless of what happens in Washington, one truth remains unchanged. The most powerful retirement strategy is an informed one. Know the rules, understand the trade-offs, look beyond the headlines, and never make a permanent claiming decision based solely on what sounds good in the moment. Your Social Security benefit may become one of the largest income sources you'll ever have in retirement. Decisions surrounding it deserve careful thought, accurate information, and a long-term perspective. We'll continue tracking every major Social Security development, every retirement policy proposal, and every change that could affect your financial future. Thank you for spending your time with us today. If you found this information valuable, share it with someone who is approaching retirement or currently collecting benefits. A single conversation can sometimes save someone from making an expensive mistake they'll live with for decades. And remember, staying informed is one of the most valuable investments you can make in your retirement future. Social Secure, USA